in social connecting. I'm Clint Skutchan with T360. I've got a great group of panelists joining me here today. And as folks are coming in, we want to remind the attendees, if you have questions that you want to ask, feel free to pop those into the chat or the Q&A. We'll be monitoring that. As you have comments, feel free to share amongst yourselves and have your own side comments. That's again a part of this idea of the connecting. We started this way back when all of the things kind of changed in our world, and it's funny how now when we first did this, there was so much interaction, and everybody was using the chat, and it was just so great to reach out and touch the folks that you knew and talk with them. And now we've become so accustomed to this Zoom format that I feel like we're less connected when we use it. So let's see if we can't reverse that here today. And so use the chat section, use the Q&A, and enjoy yourselves and share and ask questions. Happy to be joined today. This will be a fun one because I've got two Davids, and so I'll have to figure this one out, how to negotiate it. But David Bennett, David Etheredge, and then I'm going to go with Matt. I just got to go with Matt from NVAR. But how about you guys, I'll have you introduce yourselves, your companies, and where you come from. But I also want you to answer this question because we're going to talk about technology today. What's the one technology that you love to hate? And David Etheredge, as the vendor partner that's joining us here today, I might start with you.
Well, so first off, I'm David Etheredge. I'm the CEO of SavvyCard. We're based in Clearwater, Florida. I guess actually we're based in my living room now. I mean, it's sort of amazing because over the last 5 years, we've been working really hard to expand our ability to have people work remotely. We've hired some great staff in the last couple of years who really didn't want to move to Florida. And so, when the coronavirus hit, we were already, very well prepared for remote operations. And that leads into the technology that I love to hate. And that would have to be sort of, Google Meeting and Google Hangouts, which is what we use as our connectivity application. It's such a great tool. It's such a powerful tool. But what it means is that I'm always like, it's so much easier for people to justify opening up a Google Hangout meeting and interrupting me no matter what I'm doing than it would be for them to walk through a door in the office. And so I think this sort of hooks into the idea that we now are at work 24/7, 365, and there are ups and downs to that.
Yeah, indeed. David Bennett, let's go to you next.
Hey, so yeah, I think Google Gmail, our corporate Gmail, is somewhat of a fun task for us working remotely because it automatically kind of feeds in its own product, and we use Zoom. And so, if you're not careful, you may have a mess on your hands. So it's happened a few times, but I think we're all kind of experts now. I think our education staff has like 6,700 members take a course during COVID. So we've gotten quite proficient at managing those things, but still you have people that are on the wrong day, wrong time. And so it's interesting, but I agree with David Etheredge. Just the 24/7 now of everything is kind of wearing.
Yeah.
Before, we'd be at the office early or even stay late, but still there was some parameters to it all, where now it's like, oh, can't we just get on a Zoom? It's 7 o'clock at night and you're heading out the door for dinner. So it just does this never end with Zoom compared to having to travel to the association office or to travel anywhere. But it's definitely had some pluses for sure. Look at how many people have gone to NAR meetings that never experienced the National Association of Realtors or Florida Realtors or whatever state or area you're from. We've literally had thousands and thousands more participants at meetings. So that's a really positive thing, I think, for Matt and I. The engagement of a member is just gone through the roof for us.
David, remind everybody where you're located in your association.
Yeah, David Bennett, CEO of the Pinellas REALTOR Organization, and we have a chapter in the central Pasco area, which is a county just north of us, just right at 10,000 members, and we're part of Stellar MLS, about 60,000 members.
And one of the coolest in acronyms, I think, PRO, if you work that out. I think that's so cool.
Absolutely.
Well, let's go to Matt next. Matt, introduce yourself, who you're with, and then that pesky technology that you love to hate.
Absolutely. Matt Troiani. I'm Vice President of Professional Development and Chief Counsel for the Northern Virginia Association of Realtors. Our association is 12,000 plus members, and we're a local association, but we like to say we punch above our weight. We've got our own legal hotline, attorneys on staff, standard forms. And as I'll be discussing in a bit, our own forms vendor platforms as a member benefit. And it's one of those things where I'm gonna have to second that, there's a love-hate relationship with the ability to connect this way. I'm very much a person who likes to present in person, feeding off of that energy in the crowd. And it's a little bit different when you're glued to a chair and in front of a screen, but it has enhanced engagement. We're actually in the middle, we're wrapping up today a 3-week virtual convention. We used to have our conventions for one solid day, take over the campus of a local college and host that throughout the day. We decided this year to lean in. If we were going to go virtual, we were going to go big. So in honor of our coming centennial, we actually are offering 100 educational sessions over the course of 3 weeks, and we're wrapping that up today. So it's definitely been different, but it's allowed us to engage in new opportunities to really impact our members and make sure that those who might not have been able to come in person before are still able to get all the benefits. As far as the technology goes, I've got an 8-year-old at home in 3rd grade, so I'm going to have to be in the classroom. It's been great that he's still learning, and we are still completely virtual here in Northern Virginia. But my wife, I guess, mercifully has to put up with that a little bit more. As you can see, we're back in the office, although distanced and, trying to be safe.
Yeah, the whole remote learning and the technologies associated is probably quickly becoming one of those that everyone loves to hate. So that's a good one. Well, let's jump in here and kind of related to the technology. We'll talk to some of the specific technologies that you're either in charge of overseeing or administering through the association here in a moment. But general thoughts on how associations and MLSs can leverage technology offerings to enhance that value proposition, as well as then, ideally some non-dues revenue opportunities. And so, David Bennett, I may go back to you to start with, and then come to Matt, and then finish with David Etheredge.
Sure. So we have about 10 plus offerings that are outside of the multiple listing service that the Pinellas REALTOR Organization, or PRO, manages. So we have to, kind of have that filter process as to what we get approached by. Of course, all the salespeople are going to call Matt and I to get the product in, but I have a little different situation that I have to make that determination whether Pro keeps that product or can keep that product. There's kind of some loose rules as to what goes over to the regional MLS. But that has to go through a kind of a filter process with me first, and then discussions with the MLS, and or encouraging them to take the product on. Some of these new products that have come along, lots of them over the past 2 years have come out of, basements and garages and you name it. Very, very cool products, all the way down to Remind. I know Matt mentioned that. So, they were a startup not too long ago. So it's great to integrate those things. But again, we have to kind of pick and choose the things that we can handle at the association. And I think the biggest thing from that is how much buying power do we have? So, I only have 10,000 members. So the buying power for me is a little different than punting the product over to the multiple listing service, where they can buy it for 60,000 members. So vendors love to get those numbers, and it helps, helps with market penetration and all those kind of things that some of the things we're going to talk about today. But we've kept a few. SavvyCard is one of them, been wildly successful for us. We were a very early adopter of SavvyCard, to some recent ones like MOViewer during COVID, because our members just didn't have a really good way to do this and a cost efficient way. I think a lot of them were using Matterport, and so now with MOViewer, we just bought it as an association, and it's free for our members to use. And it's really, really a cool product, fairly simplistic. Sometimes the cameras and linking things up can be a little tricky, but that's a product that we took on that there's a minimal revenue stream for us. We just bought it down so that we could get it to our members as soon as possible during COVID because of just the situations that we've all faced. Florida's had, we get bounced about COVID pretty hard, but in Pinellas County and in Pasco, we only have like a 2% infection rate. So we are very, very low compared to a lot of places in the country, but members needed to be able to display these products where consumers could buy a home without ever even walking into it. And so I'm hearing tons of stories about that now, where 2 years ago, I mean, probably unheard of in my area, unless it was an investor who just said, hey, I want to buy 1,200 homes in Florida over the next year. But an individual consumer, they really want a different experience, but this product is allowing it. So it's just one of the products that we decided to hold back. It could have been punted over to the MLS and then encouraging them to get involved in it. But again, that's a slower process. So, the MLS is 30 board members, 60,000 members. It's a little more, there's a bureaucracy that you have to go through to get a product there that locally, my board of directors or executive committee, we could pull the string on something, within a few days if we had to. So sometimes you just have to make those decisions and hope that, with this one especially, you had to maybe seek some forgiveness later for doing it. If Mary Jo's on the call, sorry we didn't punt that over to you. But the members needed it, and it filled the need quickly, and that's what Pro's been about. We operate very business-like. It's very different than most associations. Very quick, very nimble, very business-like. 6 board meetings a year, and everything is kind of staff empowered. Some people will say, or I always say, it's a market driven association. So what the market wants from us, that's what we provide. And so it makes the experience quicker. So I think we had MO Viewer within a couple weeks. The hardest thing was the single sign-on. We wanted it to be single sign-on through the MLS. So it just takes time. But we have a coaching program. We do member websites, which have been wildly successful over the years. We took a bath on it in the last downturn. We lost 400 or 500 member websites. So that was a revenue stream hit for us. So we actually have people in-house. So they work on websites and those technologies and IDX, but they also serve the association. So they pay for themselves easily. And we get probably 30 website inquiries a week. It's a competitive place, so I'm not suggesting that everybody go out and do that one, but we were in it and we knew the space and do it well. So we've continued it. And I think we're just about back to the place we were from the last rundown. So it turns enough profit for us to pay for those employees, offer a quick member service. A member can get a website from us in IDX, within joining, literally. Same thing with SavvyCard. SavvyCard, the member actually has a SavvyCard the moment they take their orientation. They actually can go on their phone during orientation, and we encourage them to, and they can pick up their SavvyCard right then and there. And basically, it's a full-on IDX functionality within their SavvyCard.
That's cool. So you're doing a ton with technology. And I want to talk more about this MLS association relationship, because it's kind of key to this conversation about what technologies are appropriate for the association versus what stays in the MLS kind of purview. But Matt, talk to me a little bit about how you guys view it. Again, you mentioned you're kind of a well-established, very well-positioned organization. So yeah, I know you guys do a lot with technology, but you probably don't just do it to do it. It needs to enhance, value or generate revenue in large part.
Absolutely. And you really captured the key word there is value, but how we approach that is a lot of, it comes from a bunch of different angles. So I've got the lawyer's disease. I have to start, it depends. my team will give me a hard time for that if anybody's
I
watching.
object. No, it depends today.
The reason why because I mean, for the things that David just talked about, and I'm sure that we will all address, is that the context really matters. Is what is the platform? What are you trying to deliver? And what is the most effective way in order to go about doing that? So just a few examples from our perspective. We have a regional lockbox consortium in which we offer our lockbox services through Century Lock. We partnered with a bunch of other associations across Virginia and Maryland and DC in order to negotiate and leverage that for a better rate. So we still have our individual contracts, but we use that in order to try to get the best deal possible for our members. There are a lot of things that are provided through our MLS. Our MLS is across like 5 or 6 states and encompasses a lot of different regions, but they offer a lot like Remind Pro and things like that. Matterport is used by a lot of our members. Remind also came out with their own like virtual touring options during COVID very quickly. And that was something that was available to our members. Even though Virginia never really went so far as to say no showings whatsoever, just became a practical hurdle. You couldn't socially distance in some of these houses adequately. And people were understandably concerned. They said, you know what, hey, can I sell my property without having 100 people who are potentially exposed tracking in and out? This is a great option. So that was something our MLS did. From an association standpoint, we have a standard forms library that is used not just by us, but predominantly by the members of 5 other associations within our region. And so we've been able to leverage that into value as well. We, in addition to providing a member benefit forms platform, we also license our forms to any service that is going to have the demand and serve our members well. So we're able to derive revenue from that, which enables us to do a lot of other great things by using the popularity of our intellectual property. We spend a lot of time working on curating. But it all starts and ends with the members at the end of the day. And for Dave, I mean, it's the translation goes to customers. I mean, we're talking about our stakeholders. And so from our perspective, let's see, it was January 2018, we did our last strategic plan with the then board of directors. That was a 3-year plan. Well, we're just coming to the culmination of that now at the end of this year. And our 3 strategic drivers as a part of that plan were value, innovation, and impact. So that drives everything that we do. And so when we're taking a look at what we're going to offer, first we're going to look for what can we afford and what's going to deliver the best value. Are we the best party to be providing it? Innovation, is it going to make is it innovative? Is it going to drive forward? We're not just going to offer something that members can either get on their own or it's just, kind of apples to apples comparison. We're going to go for really what's going to drive forward, and it's going to enable us to have a long-term relationship with that vendor, not just entering into a contract for the sake of doing it. And then when it comes to impact is that, I mean, we're really fortunate. We've got a leadership that believes not just in directly serving the members, but also serving as an example. So we are willing to make investments into things in order to try to drive the industry forward. So taking a look at all of those things, I mean, believe me, it would make my life a lot easier if we just kind of contract, say, hey, this is what we're going to do every time. So I'm the one who ultimately is, keeping track of all of those things. But it's much more important that we look at each situation specifically and figure out, how can we leverage it best for our members? Who's the best party to provide it? And ultimately, is there a way for us to even leverage this in a way for, like you said, get some kind of profit or revenue out of it so we can go on and offer other things?
David Etheredge, you've got to answer that question in a very different way, right? You're getting this question specifically asked of you. Well, how's this going to add value or revenue for me, right?
Yeah. Well, it's sort of interesting. When we entered the real estate industry, we were not subject matter experts on real estate, so we had to learn the industry sort of from the ground up, and I'll put it this way: it was a very, very interesting journey to sort of understand the interplay between MLSs and associations and brokerages and agents and affiliates and the national association. I mean, it's a complex ecosystem, right? And so we were bringing SavvyCard in as a tool that we believed was going to make it easier for real estate agents to engage their customers, both with with an app that we create for the agent and an app that we create for the listings. Okay, and so we pitched it to David. He was our first paying customer, and he saw the value in it and thought it was very a very exciting product for his members, and we were very lucky that he chose to purchase it for his members. But then as we rolled it out into the marketplace and began to try to drive adoption and awareness around the program, we began to run into some of the challenges that I think every association, MLS, and vendor deals with, and that is realtors are very, very busy. They're ultimately salespeople, so their preferred mode is to be in the car driving around with the customer, not sitting in front of a computer working with technology, right? And so we began this journey where we started trying to overcome all of the objections that were associated with our product. And the first objection was, how do we automate as much as we possibly can so that the realtors don't have to do any work, okay? I hate this characterization that realtors are lazy. The high-performing realtors are some of the hardest working people that I know. And those people, it's not that they are lazy, it's that they don't have the time to go in and spend the hours that are usually necessary to really become an expert on a new tool or technology, okay? So to the extent that we can provide done-for-you services for the realtors, we're really, really getting ahead of the game. So that was the first thing that we worked on, was automating a lot of our technology. But then the second thing was, as we worked with David Bennett and other associations, we realized that there were two major problems that any vendor is going to face. And the first one is, the MLS, the associations have a limited budget. And when they lock up that budget with a specific product over the long term, if they're going to continue to provide that product, as an evergreen service to their members, as Matt was talking about, you've just sort of locked in a portion of your budget, forever. Okay, so you have this long-term liability in your finances that you can never get back again, to the extent that you continue to provide the service. So number one was, how can we provide a service where there is an associated non-dues revenue play that will allow the association of the MLS to offset that cost in the long term and hopefully turn the product into a profit center. Okay, so that's number one. Number two was, every time that I wanted to run a program to engage David's members, right? And David wants member engagement. He wants them using the SavvyCard tool. Otherwise, he can't justify the expenditure that he's making on the tool. Every time I went to do that, I had to call up David's team, and I had to basically negotiate for time, because they have lots of vendors and lots of people that are trying, and affiliates. He's got one of the largest affiliate programs in the United States. All these people are vying for time from his staff, from his marketing and communications people, right? And so we looked at that and we said, hey, is there some way that we can work with David and utilize the data that the MLS and the association has, which is I think one of the strongest components that the industry has to basically push off competitive intrusion from disruptive technology companies is the data that they've got access to. So we asked, can we use the data to create a targeted communications system that will allow us to solve our problem as a vendor, which is driving awareness and adoption of the SavvyCard service, but also solve that problem for all the other vendors, and do it in a way where David doesn't have to assign additional resources, from a marketing or communications standpoint, and where there's no cost associated with David, where it's profit center, okay? And so we just, a few months ago, launched a program called RE Target, which we developed in partnership with David Bennett and other associations and MLSs. And September, the last month, it had pretty extraordinary results, but the bottom line was, it generated a lot of engagement for member services that David is providing to his members. So his members were learning about these services that David is providing at no cost to them, and we are creating better engagement for them. But also, the program generated enough profits in revenue share to David to entirely offset the cost of SavvyCard for real estate for his association. So he's now profitable on our product with this RE Target program.
That's interesting. I want to kind of go back to where you started, whereas, we do some work with David for transparency purposes. We do work with David and Savvy. But you were saying, we entered into this as a vertical. And so you have other industries that you work with. You brought your initial SavvyCard product into the real estate space. And I think as we're working with a lot of tech vendors, there's this enamorment with the space, but then you get there and then you start to realize that, especially if we've got to innovate or we've got to move product offerings or whatever it is, it's a fairly limited space. It's a valuable one, but it has a limited space. So in this case, you evolved a product because it already had an established value proposition. But if it didn't, how hard is it for you all as technology vendors to come into the space, understand it, but then to really deliver those innovative, value, impactful things, knowing that it's a limited grouping. And oftentimes it's a group that's hard to sell to because we've got volunteer members that are also making these decisions.
So Clint, it's funny. We don't see real estate as a limited space at all because of the way that we sort of think about the market. Like, who ultimately is the consumer in the real estate space? It's the homeowner, okay? And so I think one of the advantages.
So I want to stop you there. So what you're saying is the realtor associations and the realtors that you're working with, there's a value proposition because they reach consumers.
Correct.
And that consumers are important.
Correct. Well, and I think if we look at the disruptive technology companies that have entered the market in the last 10 years, I won't name names, but there's a Z in it. If you look at those guys, they started with the perspective of what do the consumers want. Okay. And I think for a long time, the industry had a perspective of, MLS as an association see their consumers as being the agents and the brokers, right? But that creates this limited, mindset about a limited market, right? And there's an adage in Silicon Valley that, it's basically the goldfish, concept, which is if you put a goldfish into a small bowl, it only grows so big. But if you put the goldfish into a big pond, they can become 2-3 feet long, okay? And so what Zillow did was they came in and said, it's not a bowl, it's the entire world of homeowners, and they built their value proposition around the consumer and then are drilling their way back through the industry to the MLS, the association, the broker, the agent, and everything else. And when we entered, we said, hey, how can we work with the association and the agents to create more value for the consumer, right? Because ultimately we believe that that's how you're going to turn this into a much more valuable market space for the real estate industry. So to circle all the way back around, you said we do other verticals. Well, we just recently signed a partnership with IBM, and IBM is working with us with finance and insurance. And finance and insurance are highly relatable to the real estate space. And so to the extent that we can provide agents with tools that service their customers, not just their real estate needs, but their insurance needs, their finance needs, their home service needs. David Bennett has, nearly 600 affiliates. We provide SavvyCards for all of the affiliates as well. So we're trying to build an ecosystem that provides the real estate agent the maximum sort of ability to engage consumers so that they can go toe-to-toe with these technological disruptors like Zillow.
David,
I'd like to
go ahead,
back to something that Dave and David both said that I think kind of comes together, at least from our perspective, is that, ultimately in serving our members, we are not just thinking all day of, hey, what are we trying to do in order to give them something? We go and ask them. We have task force, we have work groups, we have committees, and what we're asking them is, particularly from a technology perspective, is what is going to enable you to better interface and gain and interact with your clients or customers in a way that is going to help you automate a lot of those things so that you can focus on the things that you're best at. That you all can focus on more of those, shall we say, soft skills, negotiation, interpersonal relations, managing expectations, advertising, and that kind of thing. And so when we're looking at a technology platform, we are asking the members, but it is usually framed in such a way as what's going to help you all interact with your clients better so that you can focus on those soft skills and less on the administrative tasks that you either don't have time for, like Dave said, or it's maybe just something that you don't enjoy as much. And that's what we're looking for when we're looking for technology partners. So I think that it all comes together.
David, tell me a little bit. David Etheredge had mentioned, RE Target and how member intelligence became an obvious, benefit or opportunity for him as he was developing an add-on product. Tell me a little bit about that, because we're working with so many clients right now that they're trying to get smarter about those who they serve. And so, your work through this program, is it helped? Is it enhancing? First of all, is it making you spend more time thinking about this? Because there's all this information and it's value laden, and we don't often take the time to think about how we best utilize it. We just collect it. We don't use it.
Yeah. So starting directly with David Etheredge with SavvyCard, I think the first SavvyCard you showed me was like a musician or somebody. I can't even remember what space you were showing me, but it was so Shakira. Yeah.
Shakira, the musician. Yes. Also dancer.
Yeah.
Okay.
It constantly makes me think, being so close to a provider of a service that our members use, and especially one that was new in the space, because they had to learn all the way down to nerds and our Rapatoni and all the things they had to integrate to get what they needed to make it successful. So I really think it makes me think more strategically about all of the things that I have to encounter, even down to when we started talking about the RE Target program and how cool it was for a member just last week. I think it was, it's hard time, just is really weird now, but they actually emailed or called me and said, "Hey, I know I got something from you and I saw a vendor that I wanted to use and now I can't find the email. Can you resend that to me?" And I was like, wow, that was pretty impactful. You want something from your association sometimes, sometimes we, same with Matt, we create things that we really want to help the member, and they've helped us create this product. And we don't see the fruits for a while. And, the market penetration on the products, I think Stellar MLS has like 70 products. It's unbelievable, when you have 4, 6, 8% market. And I know, Clint, you've worked with Stellar on some things. Out of 60,000 members, it's always hard to wrap your head around, how do we spend this money and this time and only 2% of the people are using this? It's really hard to manage all of those expectations, one, of the products, and then all the people who don't use it. Usually I find it's like with RPAC, when we ask, or a volunteer leadership role, when we ask, they engage, or when we can engage with them somehow, the member doesn't even know that the product exists. And some of the things, a primary example was, I think, Smart Charts in the MLS. It's free. You don't pay anything more for it. And members, we still only have like 10% of the members using it. And every single month, the stats come out, members call and say, "How can I get this depth of information?" I'm like, well, you just click on this button and it's single sign-on and you're automatically logged in, and everything you see there is free. And they are just blown away. And so what we're using RE Target for, not only for getting affiliate members and getting service providers to our members, and I think this one was an air conditioning company that this member wanted to engage with. And it was cool to be able to get that email sent back out to them. We send a targeted email. If you don't know this program, in a nutshell, let's send a targeted email to someone who's had their first closing, someone who's had a closing, I should say, a new member, a seasoned member that's producing. So we're targeting these ads that members are paying us for to very specific audience. And so I think the coolest one right now is that when the member has a closing and it hits that MLS, this email goes out immediately. An email that looks like it's from me. The problem is the member, it's coming from RE Target, but it has things that would be impactful for that member at that given moment. And so it's kind of like knowledge management. We all don't know how to do everything on this phone, but when we need it, we go find the information that we need immediately to our fingertips. And so we're kind of providing that to the member. But we're also doing it now. We're testing, and Dave just sent me this morning, thank you for doing that, that we were marketing one of our own products that's already in the MLS that they pay for, and it's no additional charge. And we just marketed it for, I believe it was like a month, Dave, and we had 10% higher penetration on one item in 1 month, or I don't know the exact amount of time, but pretty close. That's huge, because we're probably paying, you know, $20,000 a month for 60,000 people to have that. So you get 10% more usership. That just is a world of difference for volunteer leaders who are having to make decisions about a finite amount of money. Realtors don't like to raise fees on themselves very often. I think our dues have gone up $1 in 20 years. And so we have to manage crazy expectation around all of these products and services that members need and want. And so for me, when we can move the needle on, even if it's just a few percentage points every year, maybe now my expectation is that they have to move 10% every month, you know, but we're advertising our own product. And I think it's gonna change how we view what products we keep and what products we have to say, this one doesn't meet the mustard anymore, and members are not using it. We have to use that money for something else. Because trust me, the big companies don't sit around and pay for products for years and years and years. We have 2 Forms products, Form Simplicity through Florida Realtors, and we have Transaction Desk, because we had about 50% of our population using each. We can't ever get rid of those 2. I mean, we'd have a complete meltdown. And I don't blame the members. I mean, we got them used to 2 things, and now we're going to take something away. It's a really hard call, but just an amazing ability to market products to our members. So I think we're going to continue to seed that RE Target product with things that are already in the MLS that the members have as services, and see if we move that needle over time. It's an important feature. We're competing against, you know, eyeballs and money and you name it. And then, you know, another brokerage coming into our marketplace that has all the data already. So, and a lot more money than we all have collectively even. So, we have to think about those uses of time and money. And
well, I like the ancillary benefit too. If you're able to smartly target folks with the things that they need, then you don't have to broadcast them and take up space or time or energy in your other communications that you would be taking away from your advocacy activities or your education or whatever else it is to try and get their eyeballs there. So it has that ancillary impact of now being able to then really truly focus your member-based specific communications around services on those services instead of trying to splash these other items in. Matt, I know you talked about before we jumped on that you and maybe give a little bit of an overview of the product that you've onboarded in terms of your Remind product, but you know, now you're in the midst of this, exactly what was being talked about. Like now, how do you drive adoption?
Exactly. So, I mean, one of the things that, you know, I've been working on from the time that we started we finalized our strategic plan in 2018 through this year was we had, so we license our forms to the usual suspects, you know, Zip, Dotloop, DocuSign. Our members might have proprietary systems, but we've provided Transaction Desk for the better part of, I think, a decade as a member benefit. You know, before committing longer term to another, you know, renewal cycle and things like that, it kind of fell into my lap that, hey, we need to maybe go out and do our due diligence. And so spend a couple of years at conferences and conventions, meeting with vendors and testing out and familiarizing myself with the space. But then at that point, after we had done that, look, it's not up to me to make this determination. What is going to make the most sense to our members? So I had kind of narrowed it down to kind of like a top 5 of contenders. And starting back at the beginning of this year, we put together a work group with representatives from our technology advisory group, as well as our standard forms committee. And we started doing demos. And those demos actually started like 2 weeks before everything went into lockdown. But we were still managed to engage those members. Obviously, we were doing it in a virtual way, but we ended up doing demos from a bunch of different vendors and looking at the strategic plan and looking at what they thought was going to best handle those administrative tasks, be consumer friendly and agent friendly at the same time. We ended up landing on Remind Docs Plus for a variety of reasons. Number one is, like David said, you don't really want to just go through all the hassle of a conversion, take something away from your members that you think, that they know and understand, things like that, unless there's a good reason for doing so. You don't want to just move from like an apples to apples kind of thing. And so otherwise you just continue with what you have and, and it continues to improve over time. But we were really blown away by the forward-thinking nature of it. As an attorney, it was really exciting to me to see that all of the negotiation occurs in the platform itself. It's cloud-based negotiation, so that and there are smart features programmed in, so you can't miss an initial or a signature. If you put in an incorrect date, like you put a settlement date on the weekend, it's going to give you a red flag. Are you sure you want to do this? Kind of thing. Automatically pulling all kinds of information from the MLS into it, so that the form is mostly filled out. You just got to add in the particulars, and then there's an audit trail because it's all done cloud-based. Every time somebody makes an offer or counter offer or a change, it's going to flag who made the change and when. And so we felt that both from an agent functionality, a consumer experience, and then also a broker management and supervision function, that it checked all of the boxes. Because Remind was already integrated into our MLS, it also made sense too, because now we've got the single sign-on issue already taken care of. So we moved slowly to try to identify what we were going to do, but then once the decision was made, we actually, I think, moved pretty quickly. I think we signed the contract at the end of May. Before September 1st, we already had all of our forms library, which was like 80 forms and things like that programmed in, ready to go. We launched on September 1. Now we still have transaction desk to the end of the year, but we wanted to have that overlap period because we understand, look, we are not always on top of mind for our members. I mean, I think David mentioned it, and we just have to acknowledge that they're out, they're busy, they're doing their business. They're going to engage with us when they need something or they're looking for something. We can put out classes and communication till we're blue in the face, and there are better and more effective ways of doing it, which I think David and Clint both just touched on. But ultimately, at the end of the day, even if we broadcasted something 24/7 out there, there's always going to be a certain subset of members who are only going to come to it when they absolutely need to. So we wanted to have a 4-month kind of transition period where both are being offered, and then we completely switch over on January 1. But it's been an exciting process to see it go through. And kind of another thing that David shared that I think is really gratifying is sometimes you feel like you're just kind of throwing stuff out into the ether, right? Like you're doing all of this work, you're writing all these things, putting together videos and doing training sessions, and it not necessarily gets the kind of views or adoption that you're looking for. We're pretty fortunate we have a high adoption on our forms part at least. But I had a member whose brokerage, their system went down. And the member contacted us and said, hey, can you send over like a PDF fillable version of this form? I'm like, I don't have that. I don't even know how to prepare that. But I'm like,
send it by fax.
Exactly. I'm like, have you heard about Docs Plus? And I actually walked the member through on the phone. I showed them how to get into the system, where to find everything, starting to tell them about the bells and whistles. And all I hear on the other end is, really? Are you kidding me? It does that. It was the most gratifying thing that I have had in 3+ years of experience at the association, was like literally hearing in real time kind of the fruits of almost 3 years worth of my labor and putting this in front of them. And that was, it's anecdotal, but it's really gratifying when you hear that.
Yeah, I'd say, Matt, hold on to that good feeling for a while and milk it for all it's worth. Oh, David Etheredge, let me ask you about this, and I don't want to come back then to the two association folks here, but what's it like straddling this line between association and MLS? You mentioned it, upon entry, how difficult it is to understand, but then from a technologist standpoint, interacting and actually then creating all these integrations that have been alluded to, I think, by both David and Matt. What's that like for the vendor, and what should association and MLS executives be aware of, when they're working with folks that are maybe newer to the space, or even if they're not newer, still have to go between these two different types of organizations, and the coordination that has to happen, and the communications?
Well, I think to answer your last question first, I think that vendors who are new to the space, and there are a lot of new vendors. I think David Bennett was pointing out that there's lots of people, building great new products in their garages locally, and so as an AE or a CEO of an association or MLS, you're constantly going to be interacting with people who really don't understand the industry at all. I think it would be, if only we knew like a great consulting organization that could like put together maybe a white paper on the topography of the industry, so that David and Matt could just share it with them and say, here's a primer on what the industry is all about. But I think fundamentally letting people know, that the realities of sort of the economics of the industry right up front. Okay. I think a lot of people, if you're not in the market to purchase a product, you're gonna tell people, look, we're not interested at this time, or what have you. But I think what's very, very useful is to try to educate vendors on what they're going to need to do to actually be able to provide a viable product to the industry, so that they go away and revise their business plans and their business models, so that they're able to have a reasonable and realistic expectation of what they need to do, is very, very useful. You don't want to leave people who are trying to build tools that are useful for your members. You don't want to leave them in a situation where they're sort of destined to fail because they don't understand the economics of the industry, right? So that's one thing that I would recommend. But I have to tell you, we've had such extraordinary experiences with the associations and MLSs we've worked with. We provide SavvyCard for California Regional MLS. I've met with every association in CRMLS that has taken the SavvyCard product, which is over 90% of them. There's such a great interplay between the associations and the MLS. Stellar is the same way. Both Greater Tampa and Pinellas have taken SavvyCard. And when David Bennett went to Pinellas and asked them to work on this RE Target initiative, which David needed their assistance with, they were Johnny on the spot. They immediately jumped in and said, what do we got to do to create value for one of our key stakeholders? And they were just exceptional to work with. So I think the thing as a vendor that you need to understand is that you do need to talk to both the MLS and the association. They need to understand what's going on. The worst thing that you can ever do in that type of situation is surprise one of them. Okay, you just don't want to ever be in a situation where you're fielding a phone call from the MLS and they're like, we knew nothing about what was going on here. Okay, so that's the thing that I think is most important. I think we've seen through David that he has such clear and open communication channels with Mary Jo and the folks over at Stellar. And that makes our lives easier. So I would highly recommend that there is a protocol that is established between MLSs and associations for making sure that anytime one sees a product or service or vendor that they think is valuable, that there's an immediate communication of information to the other so that everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, that's super important. David Bennett, you were mentioning before we jumped on, and by the way, for those who are tuning in, Matt and David are with the second and third largest MLS organizations in the country. And so they're serving very broad contingencies, and especially in Matt's case against multiple states and counties and all these different jurisdictions. And then for you, David, obviously Stellar is large, and you made the transition into a regional. So you kind of knew what life was like before, where you kind of had both of them in a single building and similar governance structures and all that. But as you've already pointed out, there are obvious benefits about when you do pair up. Yes, maybe it changes the decision structure. Maybe you've got to be more communicative and making sure everybody's on the same page. But obviously, you've kind of seen both sides of the ledger here, running your own and making your decisions versus being in a very sizable MLS. So maybe address that if you could, David.
I think, Mary Jo might say I'm a little too progressive, but you know, it was hard. I was the CEO of both when we had our own MLS. So it took me some time to say, okay, wait a minute, I've got to come back through this filter and get my communication with regional really, really good. And I peg it on the relationships I have with them. I go to every meeting. I make sure that I'm as engaged with that regional MLS as if we owned it 100%, and we don't. We have a very minor stake in it. We were kind
But
of
I want to be clear, engagement is different than providing directive or trying to overstep or run the MLS, but being aware and involved and conveying what you know and being engaged is the important part, right? Not going in and trying to dictate or overrun or.
Yeah, exactly. That form of engagement is just been phenomenal because then, well, just right before COVID, I guess, we had another product that I just didn't think it was right for the association. But I knew the members needed it and wanted it. And so I had to then go take it over to the MLS and say, hey, how can you get the other stakeholders involved in this quickly, get a decision process, get it through the process that it has to go through. And they were just phenomenal. I mean, we had the product, I think we had the product quicker than we had the MO Viewer product that we did ourselves. And so it was amazing to be able to get something like that through another set of board of directors that I don't have the control over anymore. They're not all my members. And so it is definitely about relationships and partnering and then, pros mantra, if you will, is to be the leader. And we will do things that, like SavvyCard way back, where they didn't even know what happens in our industry day to day and how many pieces they'd have to touch, compared to getting Shakira's SavvyCard set up. So it's a real different situation. So having those pieces and building those relationships just makes things flow really well between. And I never want to be in a situation. I always want them to push back if something's not, is not right, or if I'm falling in love with my own idea, which we can all do. We love to do that, I fall in love with a lot of things that NVR has come up with. And then I've had to say, okay, will that work here? It's a different population of members, the age, the demographics, everything is a little different. But they've had some cool things over the years, and there's some things in their orientation that I use every single month in my orientation that have transitioned well. But we have I feel like we're one entity with the MLS. That's how tight the relationship is. And I make sure that I foster that. I want that relationship with Mary Jo and her leadership team to be absolutely like this every single day. They probably get annoyed by me, but because I'm prodding for the next thing, because if we don't, we'll just continue to have those products that only 3% of the members use, but we're paying for 60,000 members. And, most of our worlds, I know that it's changing. It's price per member. We don't get to only pay for the people that use it. That would be a totally different thing, but that's not our world right now. I think it's changing to more of a menu of what the member may need. Like lots of association executives, I probably have 3,000 of the 10,000 members, maybe even more than that did a single transaction or less last year. And so how can you pay for all these products for someone that does one transaction? So I think that model may have to burst at some point in time. And maybe it is bursting as we speak. But I know
that's a big one. That's a definitely big one. We've got, we're kind of winding down here. And so I want to do one last round. And I think, David Etheredge, you've even got a nice little offer for those who are watching today as well. But as we close out here, maybe talk about some of the either expected or unexpected benefits of really diving headlong into technology, because we're starting to see this idea of technology again outside of MLS really elevate amongst members in terms of they have an expectation that the the association delivers some of those. And for some that are smaller, it may be overwhelming. It's like one more thing, or but so in order to do that, there's got to be a real value or something that you take away from it for the organization. What for Matt, maybe I'll start with you. What's been this unexpected kind of response or just a takeaway they've gotten from really going headlong into offering technologies?
Well, I mean, it operates on a bunch of different levels. I mean, one of the things that I'm really grateful for working for, a progressive organization like David has, and is that, you're prepared for when things do happen. I don't think this time last year anybody could have foreseen the effects of COVID-19. Dave mentioned earlier about how quickly his staff was able to transfer, into remote operations. We did the same thing, but that was because we were prepared. You make those investments, sometimes in the hope that you don't have to use them, but just to be prepared. Sometimes they come out in different ways, but there are two ways that you can approach viewing change. You can either resist it and be dragged along kicking and screaming, or you can get ahead of it and at least be familiar with it, even if you don't necessarily love it. Because the only constant at the end of the day is going to be change. This is going to continue to adapt. I mean, associations are much like our members, and like our the vendors that we work with, is that you're constantly having to demonstrate how you're providing value. Because as soon as you have something and the members get accustomed to that, there's going to be the expectation of what comes next. And the consumers have that same expectation of our members, is that, okay, this is great, you've got the MLS. Well, okay, now tell me about all these other things that these other providers out there that shall remain nameless are providing directly to consumers and things like that. So, you can either try to fight it or put your head in the sand, or you can embrace it, try to understand it, and cultivate it for your purposes. And I think that's really my biggest takeaway from all of everything that we've done, is that, let's keep our, eyes on what's coming on in the horizon, follow, great organizations like T360 that are, taking a look at what is, next to come, and be prepared for that, so you're not caught unawares and you're able to adapt. And in doing so, you're also kind of leading by example. Say, look, hey, we know that everything kind of stinks right now, but here's the thing, is that we've got the tools, we've got the know-how, you all are capable of doing it, and we're going to model that behavior as an association for our members.
And I think just being in that space, the technology, energy, all that starts to reshape philosophies and mindsets, and does open you up more to that idea of, failing fast, failing forward, which hasn't been a trait necessarily ingrained in the association world. David, what about you?
Certainly not lawyers and people who are not.
Yeah, that's true. That is absolutely.
It does. I mean, you're absolutely correct. You've got to change your mindset. And to kind of David's point earlier too, is that, as lawyers like to get everything in writing and everything is, very, very, orderly and laid out. But this is all about relationships. A contract is only as good as the intent of the parties to it. And so, yes, there is this technological element that is inevitable and is going to continue to evolve. But at the end of the day, is that you still get to have an influence on it by the people with whom that you work, or choose not to work, and the things that you choose to adopt and work through. So it's not that the human element is removed. It only really gets removed if you remove yourself from it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. David, Bennett, I guess same question to you, kind of this unexpected aspect of learning or growing or something new that's come from all this focus and energy that you have put into technology and working with good technology partners.
Yeah, I think when we merged two associations about in 2001, we really changed up, the organization, minimal committee, and really became that market-driven piece, acting like we were Nike. Nike is not going to have 50 committees about what this check mark is going to look like. They know what it's going to look like and where it's going to be used. And that's the same with us. We really have to be market-driven and be ahead of what's coming. And sometimes the member can't even articulate what they need and want. Some of them will, some of them that are really studied, and then you get a top producer who is staying in that space way ahead of what's going on. But I always keep in the back of my mind, I have one broker who has 2,500 of my 10,000 members, one person who could make a decision, who could change the entire association. And so my relationship with that broker, like this. I'm going to lunch with that broker this Monday afternoon on my own personal time, but I keep that relationship just like we would with a customer. Nike's biggest customer. I'm sure the chief operating officer of Nike is going to dinners and brunch and cocktails with whoever their biggest distributor are in the state of Florida, whoever that is, sports, well, not sports, like Dick's Sporting Goods. And so that's how I think about the association world. I think about them as my customers and to stay as close as possible. And it's hard, Matt, we both have a lot of members, and I wish I could reach every one of them because they miss out on tools that are at their fingertips that can make them more profitable, productive. And that's what we're both in this for. It's all about the ROI, and those two things really chime into ROI. But we can't. We have to use email and video and print publications. We're still doing, if you can believe it. But it is, it's on me because my leadership team, meaning my volunteers, they're in and out. The president is a 1-year term at the association. Can you imagine if the president of the association was a 3-year term? What happens then? The dynamics change because now that person has some going concern instead of just this wheel that we have. But that's the realtor world, and I'm not sure before I retire whether that will ever change. But I think it will. I think that's a big thing for us, is because we don't look at it like Nike as a corporation will look at their customer and say, what do they need or want, and we'll buy tomorrow and enhance that relationship with their customer. We're just in a different space than that. But that's really how I think about the association and try to run the association like that. And it's hard. I come into, bump elbows with people that think that the association should not be run so business-like.
Right.
That's the philosophy that Pro likes and is our culture. And it's my job to enforce that culture. If that's what our brand is, to be the pro at whatever we're doing, that's my job. And when they don't want to be that, then they get rid of me and they bring someone else in. But until that time, I'm going to maintain that culture and keep pushing and pushing and pushing, because that is always the threat, is that one of our members, and we both have members that are like that, where I have 2,500 members in one brokerage house. They could say, we don't need you, David. We could, in Florida, so we're different in Florida, you don't have to be a realtor member. So you can go directly to the MLS, all 2,500 of those members. And so for us to be a voluntary organization membership, it's not compulsory. You don't have to be a realtor member. That may be different for Matt. I can't remember how Virginia is, but I have to prove myself every single day, every year with the dues value.
Sounds like a lot of that largely comes through those relationships, which is kind of what Matt had alluded to too. Because as much as we're talking about technology, we end up talking about relationships. I do need to close this out here, David Etheredge, and wrap it up. I guess for you, all these things we're talking about kind of come back to your business model. We're trying to connect people, we're trying to better understand, and we're trying to foster relationships and get them to the tools that they need and use. And so in that way, maybe I'll let you close out here, because I think we've got an offer for those that have stuck around here. Top of the hour.
I'll keep it very, very short, but I will say this about technology. The thing that strikes me as being very exciting about technology today, it really comes down to two things. The first one is automation, right? There are some extraordinary opportunities in terms of automating, the processes that realtors go through every day, which frees up more time for them to spend more time with their customers, right? Which gets back to the relationship piece. And so that's the first thing. The second thing, though, is the MLS and association market has extraordinary data, okay? And that data can be utilized to create extraordinary products that generate extreme value, both for their members and for their members' customers, okay? And so I think that we're a pretty conservative industry, and I think sometimes it's important that we lean in to change. And in this case, leaning into some of the technological capabilities that have been developed in other industries, like targeted advertising and targeted communications using data, using data segmentation. Those are very well understood and well developed models that other industries have created. It's time for the real estate industry to embrace those, because it'll create revenue for the MLSs and the associations, and it'll improve the engagement with your members. And so the offer that we were going to make is, I mentioned earlier that David Bennett, that in September we did a significant amount of revenue and a significant amount of engagement through this RE Target display advertising program. If you guys would like to email me, david@savvycard.com, I'd be happy to send you a market analysis for your market, right? How much engagement in terms of impressions, targeted impressions, could be generated based on the size of your membership, and what kind of recurring monthly profit stream could be generated out of targeted advertising. It's not going to be a sales pitch for our product. It's just going to be an analysis of your market using data from other industries. So email me at david@savvycard.com. Send me your name and the number of members that your association or MLS has, and I'll turn around a custom report for your market within a couple of days.
Awesome. Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
That sounds like an idea for another session of these too, because what we hear from our members all the time is they're concerned that their data is going to get sold somewhere. But I think that comes from getting them to understand, giving information or anything like that, but they're aggregate. And that could be a fun session.
Oh, it's a huge topic, and definitely for another day. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for your time and your insights here today. I truly appreciate it. And yeah, that data conversation is for another day, but it is a big and very important one, I think, for our industry to get a hold of. So thank you all for your time.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Awesome. Go out, enjoy your Friday,
Thanks.
and then we'll catch you next month here on Social Connecting. If you need anything else, you can always find us at t360.com. Lots of great opportunities there. We'll be talking more about our integration of technology into the association space moving forward as well. We're excited to talk about our tech marketplace that'll be out there and live here over the coming months, which is going to be really exciting. Give you a chance to coalesce your technologies in one place and help you with some of those technology decisions. So anyway, go out, enjoy your weekend. We'll catch you next time. Be well.